Hello everybody, welcome to what will be the first video on this channel. I am making this video to demonstrate how DXVK performs in the terribly optimized PC port Grand Theft Auto IV. Over the years there have been many attempts to optimize the game, whether it be through command line arguments or mods, however nothing comes close currently to DXVK. Today's specs are an Intel i5-8400 clocked at 2.8 GHz with a boost clock of 3.8 GHz, 16GB of DDR4 RAM clocked at 2133 MHz, and the GTX 1660 Ti with 6GB of GDDR5. We're going to be using the highest settings to see how the game performs, and then move down to a mix of high and medium to see if there's a sweet spot for visuals over FPS. And if you don't know what it is, DXVK is basically a Vulkan based translator for DirectX 9 games, meaning that GTA 4 basically runs in Vulkan, and is also able to make use of cache shaders. And in this video we are going to be taking a look specifically at DXVK 2.0. It is a recent update to DXVK which has many new features, but more notably it nearly eliminates stutters on shader compile, which GTA 4 suffers from immensely. To begin with, we are going to be setting the graphics to completely high, everything maxed out, and although it says 800 by 600 we are actually playing at 1440p. Now, the reason that GTA 4 is such a bad port is because they never actually cared to optimize the game for PC like they did for, the Xbox 360, and it's just kind of ran bad on everything apart from, like the Series X where it runs pretty decently. Even with like having an RTX 3070 with a high i9, the game will still run relatively poorly in comparison to someone who's using older hardware. They'll get like a quite stable FPS. It doesn't really make any sense, but as you can see at the start here on the max settings, we're getting about 11 frames per second on that 1% low, which is incredibly bad. That means there's a lot of stutters going on, and as you can see by the frame time graph, it's kind of all over the place. However, we are making it up in a busy area right now, getting a stable 54 FPS around with an average of 62. Looking at the skyline there, that decreased FPS a little bit, but the 1% lows are still looking relatively bad. Frame time graph is okay. Compared to the Xbox Series X, it's kind of lackluster in what you get on PC, considering the amount of raw power that we have, which doesn't really make any sense because the Series X is literally just running an emulator, which in theory would make it worse. But I think Microsoft has kind of got the emulator nailed down there. But with DXVK we can see that there isn't as many stutters. Obviously when we put the settings down later we'll see a large improvement, no spoiler intended, but that's basically how it goes. You can't really max out this game on anything, maybe if you have a 4090, but not on anything. As you can see, our i5-8400 is sitting at about 70% usage, while our 1660 Ti is currently maxed out, something we won't see later down the line in the next clip. But you can see we're still getting terribly low 1% lows with an awful frame time graph there. I don't know if you saw it as we were coming out the tunnel, but it's basically how it is. It's just terrible frame time graphs, terrible 1% lows, decent average, but in some places like here only getting 49 FPS when we have a capable system. For context, GTA 5, the game that came out after this, has incredible optimization, and people usually get quite high FPS unless you are on an old system. But yeah, that concludes our high test for GTA 4. I'm going to move to some high and medium settings roundabout now. Okay, so we've just loaded back in on GTA 4 and I've just set the settings to a mix of medium and high, and changing the sliders down to about halfway, which is basically the sweet spot, and still running at 1440p. As you can see, we've just come out and we're already on a better 1% lower than we just were, averaging about 120 frames per second. So I personally think that even just with this few seconds of gameplay, going on medium and high is the way to go. The benefits of going on the max settings don't really make any sense unless you have a system that can actually handle it, aka the newest systems that you can get. We can see that the 1660 Ti is no longer completely maxed out. It sits at about 70%, so I do estimate you can probably increase the graphic settings a little bit more. I obviously did a much more exaggerated example and changed the settings down to a bit lower than I thought initially should have been on the medium and high preset, because I just wanted to make sure that it's very playable while also looking pretty decent at the same time. Obviously GTA 4, the graphics now are outdated, but for the time it was pretty revolutionary, and it just kind of bums people out that such a great game has such terrible performance on PC, because Rockstar just don't want to give it the time to update the game and refine it. All it takes is one little update, and they did. They gave people that update, and instead of fixing things, they removed everything, such as multiplayer and, you know, the radio stations, and added some radio stations from 2016 for some reason, which doesn't make any sense. But yeah, you can see that the performance on the right there, we're getting about 100 FPS right now, 94 on average, and a much better 1% lower 40. That is incredible, like over the previous test where we're getting around 11 FPS on that 1% low. So it's much better. As you can see, the i5 and the 1660 are working in tandem to produce actual great FPS here, whereas before the 1660 Ti was getting completely maxed out. So I estimate that with a better graphics card, because this is a pretty average system, this is what like the average guy will use. I would have used a 1060, but I don't have one on hand, but it's pretty much what the average person would use. But yeah, that's basically it for this video. If you enjoyed, do like and subscribe, because it's my first video on this channel. But yeah, that has been me, and I'm gonna go. Goodbye.